of Biology 4010 Field School, Terrestrial Ecosystems, Winter Ecology. My name is Bruce Friesen-Pankratz, and I'm the professor for this course. I believe I know everybody that's on the class list. Um, so let's get started with Lecture 1A. And I've included a snip from the syllabus that includes the course title and as well as my email address. So if you ever have to get a hold of me throughout the course, you can do so by emailing me. In this first lecture, we're going to go over the course overview, and then we'll do something I like to call the ecology primer. So, some of us may have taken ecology in the past, others may have not, and so this will kind of get us all on a kind of even footing for what's to come in this class. I'm going to start with the course overview, and I've snipped out the course description and other text from the syllabus, and I just thought I'd highlight a few things so that we know what's happening and we know what's happening. Okay, so first off, let's take a look at the course description. Field-based course explores the ecology of natural and altered terrestrial ecosystems within the Rat River watershed. It builds upon the ecological sampling techniques and data analysis skills introduced in field methods and ecology. Asterisks. So you can see with this asterisk, we highlight down here that there are the prerequisites, although they occur here, they've been waived for this year. This is the first time we're offering this course, and so we made the decision to waive the prerequisites. Another thing I'd like to point out is that this is the general description of the course, and this year that we're offering it, we're making it specific with that winter ecology subheading. And so while we've designed this to be delivered in places like the Rat River watershed, we also have the luxury of delivering it in other places, such as in the Manitoba's Boreal Shield ecoregion, which is not within the Rat River watershed, but that's where we're going to be having the field component. Okay, well, let's keep taking a look at the course description. Ecology is the scientific study of relationships between organisms and their environment. This includes the study of organisms' relationships with both abiotic and biotic components of their environment. So these are two words we'll come across a lot in this class. When we say something is abiotic, well, A means without, and biotic refers to things that are alive, so without life. So non-living things, and biotic means living things. Okay. I mentioned a minute ago that we're going to be looking at winter ecology, specifically within Manitoba's Boreal Shield ecoregion. So we'll learn more about what that means today and in future lectures. And these lectures, such as the one you're listening to right now, they will be available. I would like you to complete watching them by the time we head out to the field station on February 17th. And that's because we just want to make sure you guys are prepared so that when we're out in the field, at the field station, we can make the most of being out in the environment and not having to have as much sort of in-class lectures. In terms of the course objectives, I'll let you read all of this, but I just wanted to highlight a few things like this. Historically, boreal ecologists tended to conduct their fieldwork during the growing season, June through August. One of the reasons for this was undoubtedly due to the relative ease and greater comfort of conducting fieldwork in the summer versus in the winter. However, to truly understand the ecology of the Boreal Shield, studies during the winter season must be included. So that's going to be a kind of a reoccurring theme in this class, that we can't, as ecologists, as people who study the relationships between organisms and their environment, we can't ignore the winter season. Even though it might be a little more difficult to work outside in the wintertime, it's a pretty big component of the life cycle of things that live in this environment. Okay, on to the next slide. So we've got some readings to do, and some of these readings are found in textbooks, like this textbook that's available as an ebook through the province's university library. So if you want to know how to find that, you can contact the librarian, or you can contact me and make sure that you have access to this ebook. And then, pardon me, there's a couple of other readings. This one here is specific to the field station that we'll be visiting and working at. And then there's a couple of publications that I'm going to ask you to read that are in primary research journals. Like, well, this is a technical bulletin, but we've got a document called, or a journal article, a journal title called Environmental Reviews, and another one called Global Change Biology. So I will make these available on the Populi, pardon me, Populi website for the course under the Files tab, and I'll have a folder in there that'll say text. Okay, what are you doing to get a mark in this class? Well, you can check this out. There are no exams in this class, but your mark is based on some readings and accompanying worksheets. Big chunk of your mark is based on field journal entries that will be done when we're out at Arosha at the field station. And half your mark is based on this research project, which I'll discuss briefly today and then in more detail as the course progresses. So first of all, these 10% of the course mark is based on these readings and worksheets, and those will be uploaded on Populi. So they'll be related. The worksheets will have a couple questions related to the readings, and those readings are from the text that I showed you earlier on that earlier slide. Then 40% of your class mark or course mark is going to be based on your field journal entries. So I just want to make a comment. This is, again, all snipped from the syllabus, so you can read it at your leisure. But, you know, having a field notes for a field biologist or a field ecologist is essential. You know, they are what you observe when you're working in the field. And they can be used, well, they're really important because you're writing down information that you're going to later probably transfer over to a database or use as you write up your results for research you're conducting. But they can also be used as legal documents, as evidence in court cases. So I know in some of my other classes, maybe people have been in, I've mentioned how in the past some of the ecological work that I've done has contributed and provided evidence for court cases. Some of these court cases were, you know, worth like millions of dollars because they had to do with understanding where certain ecosystems began and ended in terms of these sensitive systems and development. And as part of the court cases around those situations, our field notes were brought in as evidence, and as such, it's important that you include information that we'll talk about later in more detail, but information like the date, the time, who else was out in the field with you, general conditions like the weather and the cloud coverage, and then, of course, whatever it is that you're looking at in more specific detail. Now, you don't necessarily have to have this field note journal that I'm showing you. This is probably one of the best examples, and you can buy these, and it's a nice size. You can take it out into the field easily. It also has Write in the Rain paper, so if it's raining out, the paper isn't getting smudged, or your writing isn't getting smudged. But you know, if you don't want to buy one of these, pretty much any smaller journal uh, is appropriate. I don't like the use of sheets, paper by themselves on a clipboard, because there's a greater chance of them getting lost. Plus, they're not all combined. So if you have a journal like this that isn't ringed, for instance, it's pretty easy to see if pages have been ripped out. And again, it lends itself to a more discrete, um, accurate account of what you're observing. Okay, I'll discuss this in more detail when we're actually out there at the field station. And then there's this 50%. Wow, half your course mark is based on this research project. And how do you get that? Well, I've broken it down to include the following: your research question, this something called this annotated bibliography, the proposal, the actual research is a big chunk of it, and then there's going to be a presentation and a report. And you can either work on this research by yourself, or you can work in a group. And I've mentioned in groups of 2. That's probably the best. Then we can ensure that if we get groups of 3 or whatever, it's a little harder to kind of keep track on whether or not all members are contributing equally. So we can talk more about how these research groups as we get closer to the actual field part of the work. But I wanted to focus on these 2 things, the research question and this annotated bibliography, briefly in today's lecture. So I've been thinking about some research projects, and you could come up with questions based on these projects to get your 5% of this research project mark. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 6 options. Again, we don't have to be limited to these, but if you're looking at these options and you're like, wow, that's something that I'm really interested in, we can decide. I can work with you to kind of establish what you want to be working on, and maybe whether you want to work on it with someone else or by yourself. So I've listed these cavity survey. Are we looking at your mouth? No. The kind of cavities we're looking at here are like holes in, let's say, a dead tree. And these holes provide really valuable habitat for cavity nesters. Maybe it's a bird, maybe it's a squirrel. And so you could go out and maybe your research project is looking at where do we find these on the property that we're going to be working on within these different eco units that we'll be talking about later. Or you might want to look at snow characteristics. You might want to do a tree survey. You might want to map animal tracks. Maybe you're going to do interested in doing a bird survey, or maybe something like mapping emergent vegetation. You can compare these different types of systems. And again, if you're wondering about any of these words, maybe if they're new to you, don't worry. We'll explain them in more detail later on. But I just wanted you to introduce you the idea of what's expected for this research project. All right, so this annotated bibliography, so that's worth 25%. Big chunk, 1/4 of this overall research project grade. What are we looking for here? Well, I made an example here. All you need to do is have well, not all, but to start with, if you could construct a table like this would be a really easy way of setting it up. Easy formatting. So in Word, you could create a table. Looks like there are 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. Columns go up and down in the table. And in my table, I've created 11 rows. And I've only filled in the first 2. But in column number 1, you're going to put what reference number you're using, or what reference number you're going to be discussing. And these don't have to be in any specific order, but the reason I have 10 here is if you want to get full marks, part of the rubric is having at least 10 references or citations. So this will help me later. If this person handed it in with only 2, then they're not going to get full marks for that annotated bibliography portion of the research project. In this case, my example that I'm using here, I'm interested in looking at when ice when aquatic systems freeze, like a pond or a lake or a river. So the two examples of citations in my annotated bibliography that I've included here, under the citation column, I'm putting, this is what it's going to look like if I use this in the text in my research proposal. So I could cite it like this, right? So this is going to make it really easy for me to write my research proposal later on in my research report, because I've got these citations all set up, and I've read this document, and I've taken notes. So this document talks about using sediment core. So they've gone to the bottom of this lake, and they're sticking a tube into the muck, if you want to call it muck, deep down, and they're looking at information from that sediment core, and from that they were able to figure out when ice in and ice out dates were. So I've taken some notes. Look at that. I don't have to take a lot in here, but this is going to help me later to write my paper, or to write my research proposal and my presentation. And then I give my full reference, so later on when I'm putting this thing together, I can just snip this out and put it in my reference list. This is going to help me a lot in getting my proposal and my report done later in the term. So again, I can provide more details on this later on, but for now, that's what we got. Okay, let's move on to, well, I guess those other components of the research project I will discuss later on, but I wanted you to get thinking about the research question, and I think that's obviously the place we have to start. Okay, so course overview. Here we go with the lectures. There are 5 of them, 2 parts each, and I've also included here, this is from the syllabus, when these worksheets are coming out. Is this meaning when they're due? No, this just kind of shows that probably worksheet 1, if you jump ahead and you're trying to work on worksheet 5 and you haven't listened to these lectures up until then, it might be harder for you to accomplish that completion of that worksheet. So today, or well, in this current lecture, we're going to do this ecology primer. All right. Then, small text because I snipped it. I want to get the whole table in. Here's what we're doing out in the field. So your reading week. We're getting to the field station at some point before 1 o'clock, because at 1 o'clock you'll have you're all going to be all ready to start the field component, and we'll do some orientation, some walking around the site, and then they'll have lots of time. You'll have lots of time if you look at the schedule here to work on your research projects. Okay, and then this week ends up on Friday at about 4:30. We'll wrap up, and then you guys can be on your way back to wherever it is that you're going to go to, your home, I guess. Now, I wanted to show you, like, these evening sessions are pretty wide open. You know, sometimes we'll have scheduled things like water quality analysis, for instance, but we're giving you that time to work on your projects, and I'll be available to help make sure that you're getting them done. But at 8 o'clock, you know, you can keep on working on your project, that's fine, but at 8 o'clock we want to recognize that you have other things to do, and that might include studying and working on other courses. Okay, we can talk more about the logistics in future lectures in terms of meals and such, but for now, thinking about how to get there. So it looks like it's about an hour and 20, hour and a half drive. This is from Providence. There's a couple of ways of getting there, but you basically end up on the #1 highway, driving very carefully, and I can give you further directions, or Google can, but it's about an hour and a half drive to the field station. And if you're interested in seeing what the field station looks like, you can click on this website and get more pictures of the site and of this organization called Arosha. Or if you speak Portuguese, maybe you know how to pronounce it properly, because I believe this is a word in Portuguese. You know, when we're thinking about these slides, If I'm showing you something that is not my own, I'm going to include a web address for it. That includes photos. So this is something to think about when you're putting together your research presentation and you're using, let's say, PowerPoint. If you have a photo that is yours, great. You don't need to cite it, but if you snip something from the internet, it's good practice to snip the website right away so you don't get accused of stealing or plagiarism. Well, let's jump into the next section. Again, if you have questions about the course requirements, give me an email. Ecology primer. Well, here we go. I'm looking at this nice picture, winter setting. I'm thinking about ecology in the wintertime, and I'm thinking about the interactions between this living thing, in this case, some kind of a tree, and its environment. That's what ecology is. So if somebody asks you, oh, you're taking this winter ecology, I don't even know what ecology is. Here's a great definition. It's the scientific study of the relationship between organisms and their environment. And I always like to figure out where these words come from because it helps me remember, keeps me on track. And so if I look at this word ecology, and we might think of a lot of words that begin with eco, right? So you go to the store and you're trying to be eco-friendly, and now you don't get plastic bags. Okay, so eco. Where does that word ecology, eco, come from? Well, if you look at eco, that actually comes from this word ocus, which is talking about the household or the family. And maybe we've seen that if we buy certain brands of yogurt. But that's where this term eco comes from, the family or household. And ology or lology is the study of something. So maybe you've taken a biology class. That's the study of life. So in this case, this is the study of the household or the family. And in this case, we're looking at the family, meaning, you know, organisms and their family. We extend that to their environment. We also see this word ocus, not just as a brand of yogurt, but as the title of a journal that's related to ecology. This is a very famous and powerful journal. You know, we can take a look at the rankings of different journals. They give them rankings in terms of their content. So if you're doing your annotated bibliography in preparation for your research proposal, maybe you'll find some articles in the journal Ocus. And I've highlighted, well, I snipped this, you can click on here to get more information, but I put the square around this because look, what is this doing? Well, it's defined, ecology defined as organism environment interactions. Yeah, that's how we define it as well. So really, here we go. That's what ecology is. And if we look at a little bit of the history of ecology, or if we want to think about founding members of this discipline, this Ernest Haeckel would come to mind. And he's often acknowledged as the father of ecology. And he says that this is the relation of the animal, and we're going to extend that obviously to all living things, both to its organic as well as its inorganic environment. So what was he meaning when he said organic and inorganic environment? I wonder. Well, we can think of those terms abiotic and biotic. We like to use those as opposed to organic and inorganic. And so when we say organic, well, that means the biotic portion of the environment, and inorganic, well, that refers to the abiotic. Now, Ernest Haeckel also has a lot of prints that he did, a lot of drawings, and this comes from some of the work that he did drawing diatoms. These are microscopic algae, and perhaps we'll have a chance to see some of these in the field setting. We collect some samples, but they're algae. They can photosynthesize. Maybe some of us remember what that means, taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turning it into a sugar. So yeah, he was father of ecology, okay. He has made these amazing prints, yes. But, um, sometimes in our review of scientists, we sometimes gloss over some of the other parts of their lives. And unfortunately, with Haeckel, um, some of his work, ecological work, he misinterpreted and used to contribute to, or it was misinterpreted and he misinterpreted it, and it was used um, and contribute to the rise of Nazis in pre-war Germany. So we're going to move on then from him and think about the components. If ecology is the study of the relationship between organisms and their abiotic and biotic environment, here we've got a living thing. Well, this is a common name for this thing is cattail, and we'll probably have a chance to see cattail. This is emergent vegetation. Maybe you've seen cattail. Maybe you've gone out and grabbed a cattail like this and thought this would look great in a flower display. And you bring it home, and at some point, all the seeds in this portion of the cattail seed head fluff out and get all over your house. Or maybe you grab the end of this and push them up, and you can see, wow, cattail seed dispersal probably uses wind. Maybe you've also been out in the springtime and realized that a cattail has actually got male and female parts to it. So what you're seeing here is the seed head, which was originally part of the female part of the flower, and it now has the seeds on it. And the male part actually occurs up here. You kind of see it a little bit here, and it produces the pollen. All right, so if we use this picture as an example, and we're thinking about, well, this is the cattail, even though at this point we're looking at it in the wintertime when the above ground portion of it is actually dead. But let's think about what might be some of the abiotic components of this cattail's environment. I'll let you think about that for a little bit, and then I will advance to the next slide that shows abiotic but also biotic. So what are some of the living things in this cattail's environment? What are some of the abiotic components of this cattail's environment? Maybe you can pause here and think about it, and then I'm going to advance the slide. Well, as an ecologist, these are things that I would think about. Sunlight, that's a big one. Temperature, that's a big one. And water. Those are really important abiotic environmental components that I can kind of see in this photo. I can kind of see the sunlight because if there was no sun right now, it'd be dark. I couldn't see anything in the picture. Temperature, well, I can kind of see the effects of the temperature because it shows me that the water now is in a solid phase. So those are really important things, abiotic components. And I can't see the growing material or the medium. I can't see the soils that this is growing in, but that might be another one that I would include as being really important, abiotic. Although, if you remember, soils also have a biotic component to them. Well, let's look at some obvious biotic components. Well, we got the cattail, that's what we're talking about. We have other cattail in this area, so it's interacting. These would be like intra-species interactions. So interactions with members of its own type, own species. Maybe it's interacting with other biotic components of the environment. I see trees here, so maybe there's interactions there. Maybe the trees are slowing down water infiltration or flow to this environment here where the cattail is growing. I also, if I zoom in here, maybe your keen eye can see some animal tracks. So that would be another biotic component of this cattail's environment. Well, as an ecologist, we use this hierarchy of different levels, kind of moving out in these concentric circles, getting bigger and bigger, right? So if we start here with this individual I can look at this unit where I'm looking at a specific individual, and that individual belongs to a population of similar individuals, and that belongs to a community. Well, let's take a look at these different levels in this ecological hierarchy of systems. Okay, so you'll note, got a big moose here. This is not my photo because I've included this link here. I wish this was my photo. But if we're looking at the individual level, that's the basic unit of ecology. We're looking at the individual and how it responds to its biotic and abiotic environment. And if I look at this picture, I can think about how it's responding to this abiotic environment of this highway. Even though it's not a natural system here, it's abiotic, it's definitely part of its environment. Why is it here on the road? I don't know, but an ecologist might ask questions like that. So an ecologist could study this individual moose. An ecologist might also study a population. Maybe using moose as an example, we could look at different populations of moose. What is a population? Well, it's a group or individuals of the same species that occur together in time and space. And, lately, really current topic here in Manitoba is the number of moose hunting licenses that are being allowed. And it's been reduced partially because of information collected on moose populations. So there's a moose population right here, and maybe some of you can identify number 10. If your eyes are really good, maybe you can zoom in and see that it says Riding Mountain. So we have a population of moose in Riding Mountain National Park. And that would be a different population than we would find way over here in kind of northwestern Saskatchewan. So this would be a moose population here, and same species, they're all moose, and the same time and same space. So we can look at data. Wow, we see some of these moose populations over time have really dropped since data was collected on them. So ecologists can study at the individual level, at the population level, and then moving out a bit further, we can also study systems at a community level. What's a community? It's populations of various species that are co-occurring at the same time and space and place. So here, maybe I have a community. I got a population of cattail. I got a population, well, some of these trees are dead, but I have a population of trees here, certain species of trees, and these guys are co-occurring in the same time and place. I would call this a community. Now, don't get too hung up when we move from community to this next level, this ecosystem. So while we can define it very easily, we can say that an ecosystem is one or more communities that are interacting with their environment as a defined unit. So sometimes ecologists, it's hard to differentiate sometimes between a community and an ecosystem. So I'm looking at this thing and this picture here, and I can see different populations of trees of the same species, and I can see that they're interacting. And so is this a community? Well, I can see that a community can actually represent an ecosystem, because an ecosystem can be one or more communities. So we won't get too hung up on ecosystem. If I look at this, is this an ecosystem? Is this a community? And we'll introduce the next level, and then even further saying, well, we've got a biome now. Now we're looking at a pretty big scale. Wow, look at that. Look at this massive biome here called a desert. We see deserts occurring in places like the Sahara Desert in northern Africa, or we can see like deserts in southwestern United States, or a big chunk of Australia is a desert. Well, if we look in Canada and we're looking at these biomes, these geographically extensive ecosystems, I see a major ecosystem covering much of Canada, and that same system is covering much of Europe and Russia, and that's this boreal forest, or if you can also use the term taiga. So, our field station that we're going to go study at over the reading week is right here, roughly, right here in the taiga, in the boreal forest. This is the biome that is covering a great chunk of Canada and, good chunk of Europe and Russia. Really important biome in terms of things like global photosynthesis. Okay, if we use this term biome and we look at Manitoba specifically, here we are. We see the boreal forest. Maybe some of us have had the opportunity to go north to Churchill, and we would have been in the tundra biome. Right now, maybe you're sitting and watching this at Providence, then you're in this grassland biome for the most part. Okay, well, that kind of gives you these classical or traditional units of ecological systems, from individual all the way to biome. And there are a lot more in the in-betweens that we use as ecologists. So the last slide I'm going to show you in this lecture is actually from a document that you guys are going to read later on, Arosha 2006. You'll have that in your populi. And this is a map of the field station. Well, at least in this quadrant here. This is the area that we'll be working in. Oh boy, I got a phone call coming in. I'm going to pause this. Okay, so in this northern part, so if you're looking at a map or an image and it's produced well, which this one is, it should have at least two things on it. It should have a compass rose indicating at least north. So if you know where north is, you know where those other cardinal directions are. And if you're wondering why north is always traditionally up on a map, there's a new publication book out that talks about the history of why that is the case. Anyway, that's sort of standard practice that we're using. So north is facing up. I can see my rose compass. And this is the field station that we'll be at. This is a #1 highway. Too bad that it's so close to the field station in terms of its noise pollution factor, and also it's really cut off if we think about wildlife in this section wanting to use habitat on the other section up here, it's going to have to cross this dangerously busy highway, which presents human health concerns in terms of drivers, and also obviously concerns to the wildlife. Anyway, if we think about these, how ecologists study the different units, in this case, they're using something called an eco unit. And is this ecosystem? Is this a community? Is this a pop? Well, we know it's not an individual. So let's look at eco unit number 9. So I see it presented here, and I go over here, and the legend here tells me that it's black spruce and it's a mature forest. So, obviously it wouldn't just be black spruce. We're not looking at just a certain individual or the black spruce population, but we would have other species in there. But this is definitely a way that ecologists can also divide up their units of study. So it's not at an individual level, it's not at a population level, but it's at its own defined eco-unit level based on the predominant or dominant vegetation type in that area. Okay, well that wraps up lecture 1A, and we'll see you soon in lecture 1B.